Ms. Rodriguez, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Thompson. Here. Commissioner Schwartz.
Here.
Commissioner Lodge.
Here.
Commissioner Higgins.
Here.
Okay. Commissioner Jordan, absent. Commissioner Peugeot.
Here.
Commissioner Campanella.
Here. Okay, thank you. And now, next we'll move on to preliminary matters. Ms. Gallarde, is there any requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of ex-agenda items?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no continuance or postponements. I have a couple of announcements.
Please.
One is that the meeting of Thursday, April 7th will be canceled. You have a joint Planning Commission and City Council meeting that day, so we'll be canceling your regular Planning Commission meeting. Also, there's a few appeals of the staff hearing officer coming your way, and I just wanted to let you know about those. On March 3rd, we have the appeal of an interior setback modification at 941 Medio Road. On March 10th, you have an appeal of a front yard setback modification at 1417 San Miguel. And on March 17th, you have a staff hearing officer appeal of an approval of a medical marijuana dispensary. 118 North Milpa Street. That's all. Nothing else.
So now we'll move on to review, consideration, and action for the draft Planning Commission minutes and resolutions of January 21st, 2016. And that was a joint meeting with the Montecito Planning Commission. And Julie, did you have a comment from them? Because they got a copy of the minutes as well, correct? Draft.
Yes, as a courtesy, I forwarded this to the Montecito Planning Commission as well, and we did receive one comment from Michael Phillips asking that his statement be changed to might have less jurisdiction as opposed to has less jurisdiction, and that change has been noted and made.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or changes recommended by the planning commissioners on the January 21st minutes? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Oh, I'm sorry, pardon me.
Oh.
Didn't see Commissioner Peugeot. You had a comment.
Thank you. I have a edit to page 4 comments under my name at the top of the page, and that is the third bullet. It says, today sent a clear message that the completion of the project study report. That's actually a term of a document type, so that should be capitalized, I think. Projects, capital P, capital S, capital R. And the city and county, and here's where I have a bit of a revision to make it more clear what that trigger did in my mind. The city and county highway design committees will be queued to start design review for the 35% drawings. Design review, small design review, not big capital design review for the 35% drawings. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or changes? If not, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next item is under preliminary matters would be a chance for the public to speak. Any comments they would have on an item that's not on today's agenda? Do we have any members of the public that would like to speak? Okay. Seeing none, I'll close public comment. Next is a new item. It's going to be about a discretionary application for an amendment to a conditional use permit and a setback modification. And Mr. Baumann, are you going to present for staff?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Why don't you go forward?
Okay, thank you, Chair Campanella and Commissioners. This item is a request for an amendment to a conditional use permit for a planned residence development and also a zoning modification at the single-family residential property at 1211 Sarah Vista Lane. The project is located just below APS. It's in the Lower Riviera neighborhood, just to the west of Santa Barbara Middle School, directly up the hill above the Santa Barbara Bowl. This is a closer aerial view of the area that it encompasses that planned residence development. This is Newton Road that goes down below APS and dead ends down at the top of the Bowl property. And then Sierra Vista Lane is a private lane within the development. This has a one-way traffic flow. We saw that at the site visit. So to give the commission some background on this property, the land was developed with single-family dwellings that were non-conforming to residential density with more than one dwelling unit per lot in a single-family residential zone. The houses were built with city building permits. However, the non-conforming status in terms of density meant that they were very limited in the types of allowed improvements. So in 1991, in order to resolve those nonconformancies, the city approved a solution involving a combination of rezoning from A1 to E1. So that was a bit of a upzoning, I guess you could say. And also creating a planned residence development subdivision with that conditional use permit. And it also involved some zoning modifications. So there were 7 lots in the planned residence development, and one of those lots is designated open space, and that was next to where we parked when we went up there on that site visit. So that planned residence development also gave lot lines drawn around each dwelling to serve as building envelopes or development envelopes. And Lot 4, the subject lot, had a front setback modification for the underlying zoning required setback. So because the site was non-conforming to density and also located on a visible hillside facing the city, there was concern about future overdevelopment of the properties. So square footage limitations were put in place. And the outcome of that was Planning Commission Resolution 03091, and that's the governing document for this site and the subject lot. And today the Planning Commission is requested to consider one amendment to the conditions in that resolution, as well as a zoning modification of the required perimeter setback of the planned residence development. This is a map from the archives, and it provides a simple illustration of the layout of that property. So this upper area where these 4 houses, they were 4 houses built on one lot back when it was A1 zone, and also the 2 lots here were built on one lot. So that was part of what they were trying to resolve with that 1991 process. So now I'll just run through a project description. This is site plan 1211 Sierra Vista, Lot 4 in that subdivision. That lot line is shown in green here. The existing 1,202 square foot, 1-story house footprint is this pretty simple yellow rectangle. So the proposal involves 1-story additions going out on this side in the gray, and this would be new but unenclosed, sort of a loggia or covered area but not enclosed. There's a proposed second floor of 552 square feet shown in the hatched. I don't know if you can see the lines, but the lines that run diagonally this way is all the new second floor. And then a new 494 square foot 2-car garage where it's crosshatched this way. So this is the garage, and this area is second floor habitable. And then there's an uncovered second-story terrace here. And then this end of the house over here would remain 1-story. There's a new driveway proposed at the upper end. This Sierra Vista is going up very steeply, and then a new driveway proposed in where is now just a landscaped area to come into that upper level garage. So this configuration with the garage at the upper level requires minimal grading at the existing site. This just shows the north elevation. This would be facing Alameda Padre Serra, showing that new garage on the upper level. This gives you some idea of the level of the existing one-story house. This area would remain one-story. And the proposed south elevation, this would be facing the city. The new two-story with this area being an uncovered upper-level terrace. The project went to the Single Family Design Review Board once on June 1st, 2015, and the SFDB was generally satisfied with the project and continued it to the Planning Commission with these comments in their minutes. They found the style, size was acceptable. I believe there was a discrepancy on the drawings between some plate heights that were shown, so they asked to clarify the plate heights, and they also recommended 9 feet on the first floor, 7 feet 6 on the second, to control the overall height of the house. They liked the location of the second floor, the way it was pushed sort of away from that Serra Vista lane in terms of the second floor massing. The location of the driveway was appropriate. The upper level deck compatible with the house. Number 6 is whenever SFDB makes any approval, they have to make neighborhood preservation ordinance findings. So this number 6 is sort of a touch on the NPO findings that they will make when the project goes back to them for an approval. And they said follow the good neighbor guidelines, preserve the 2 existing palm trees that are on the north side of the house next to the new driveway and the native foliage. And they commented on the modification request, that it was aesthetically appropriate and consistent with the residential design guidelines. So today, the applicant is requesting an amendment to the conditional use permit for that planned residence development to increase the maximum allowed square footage on Lot 4 from 1,800 to 2,000 square feet. This square footage limitation is exclusive of porches, carport, and garage square footages. Exhibit A, attached to your staff report, shows the proposed condition 1B2 on page 1 of the conditions. The limit for Lot 4 is currently 1,800 square feet, and the applicant's proposed design is 1,981 square feet, so the proposed project would be 191 square feet larger than currently allowed. And a similar request was approved by the Planning Commission back in 1998 for the house next door to the west, which is on Lot 5 at 1227 Serra Vista. Similarly, to increase that property's maximum allowed square footage from 1,800 to 2,000 square feet. So for the Commission to decide on the amendment to the conditional use permit, you must consider the findings for a conditional use permit. And those are abbreviated here on this slide, but they're copied directly from the ordinance in your staff report. That the use is essential or desirable, not detrimental to the public, doesn't affect surrounding property values, avoids impacts to surrounding properties, provides adequate access and parking. The appearance is compatible with the character of the area. So the second part of the applicant's request today is for a setback modification. That would be for a provision in the planned residence development ordinance that states the required setback from the perimeter of the development specifies that setback from the exterior boundary for main or accessory buildings or structures should not be set back less than the height of those structures. So whatever the height of the structure is proposed to be, that establishes what the required setback is. In this case, the proposed building height would be 24 feet, and therefore it's required to be set back 24 feet. However, it's proposed to be set back 20 feet. This is just kind of a graphic illustration of that. That upper blue line at the top is the actual boundary line of this planned residence development. And because this particular structure's proposed height is 24 feet, the red line shows that 24-foot setback from the boundary. And then the shaded red area is the area where the house would encroach. And that is the front of the two-car garage at the garage door at the driveway. And then just showing the elevations with the setback line imposed on there. So that front part of the garage is encroaching in the setback. The opposite side, the proposed west elevation. And that garage door is approximately 40 feet from the edge of the actual road of APS. So the findings for the Planning Commission to consider in granting the setback modification are that the modification is consistent with the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance, and also it's necessary to secure an appropriate improvement. And staff and the SFDB believe this project is an appropriate improvement. So staff's recommendation is that the Planning Commission approve the amendment to the condition in the conditional use permit and the setback modification with the findings and conditions of approval as shown in your staff report. This concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a presentation from the applicant as well? Good afternoon. Please mention your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Chair Campanella, Commissioners. I'm Jarrett Gorin from Vanguard Planning, and I represent the owners, Brian and Cindy McCoy. And I'll go through my presentation, and I actually don't have a ton of overlap with staff, so I'll cover a couple of other issues which will probably be good for the discussion as well. So let me get started with the neighborhood context. Here's an aerial photo of the site. Wow, that's pixelated, but you can kind of see what's going on up here. The neighborhood up there is characterized by fairly large homes. They are hillside homes, but they're big homes. You can see this is us. We're one of the smallest homes up there, and that's our site right there, 1211 Cerro Vista, and the existing house is 1,202 square feet. It's a very small house. Right across the street from us, we've got in the same PRD, we've got this house at 2,500 square feet right across the street. Then moving right down the street, it's a one-story house, but it's 2,400 square feet. This is also in the same PRD. Then moving right over here, also in our PRD, it's a two-story, 2,500 and change on Newton Road. And then right outside the entrance, I think this is also part of our PRD as well. We've got a 3,000 square foot two-story house there. And then right up here above us on APS, we've got these two homes, pretty representative of what's in the area, about 3,000 square foot homes. So fairly large homes around us. We weren't anywhere near the 85%. I mean, you can't really calculate FARs on this site because we don't really have a real lot here. But we did a 20 closest homes analysis just to look at sizes. We got the assessor's data. I'll go through that in a second here. This is the closer in view of the PRD. There's our house again. And this is the existing floor plan. And again, it's a really small house. We only have 2 bedrooms and sort of a central living area and a couple other dining room and a little office. And we'll be adding on to the house. On the ground floor, mainly it's just to get stairs up and to provide some additional support for the garage, which is going to be up above. So that's the footprint of the house superimposed over there. And then this is the only additional habitable area on the ground floor that's being added. The rest of it's all exterior space. Then if we move upstairs, I've outlined the second story mass, so you can see that's all stepped back. The single family design board was appreciative of that. This is the wedding cake thing that Councilmember White talks about. The habitable area is this shaded blue area here, and then the majority of the area upstairs is the garage, and that's going to resolve the existing legal non-conforming parking situation that we don't have 2 covered parking spaces, and we would after this project. And what that looks like in the elevations, this is the side that faces Cerro Vista Lane, the private driveway. That'll turn into this. You can see the 1-story portion of the roof right there. This is the downhill side, and then this is an open terrace right here, and this is the existing patio. This is the side which faces our neighbor. Now, our nearest neighbor is pretty far away, and there's a lot of landscaping in between, but we've stripped that all off in these elevations so that you can see what's going on here. And finally, the north elevation that faces Alameda Padre Serra, which even with the 2nd-story addition, it still pretty much presents as a 1-story house to the north because it presents as an underground house right now. And then this is it in site plan. So all we're doing here is we're basically following the grade up until it matches the plate height of the existing house, and then kind of coming into it and hitting a garage up at that height, and then putting in some supplemental landscaping around there. But almost no grading at all is required to carry this out. And we're able to do this all within the existing lot, quote unquote, or building envelope that is already on the map. So we don't actually have to change the map itself, just the condition that relates to the square footage. So with all of these additions, when we did this 20 closest homes analysis, even after adding all of this space, we still come in the bottom third of everything that's around us. The house itself is still 1,981 square feet. The average for everything around us is about 2,300. And then if you do the house plus the garage, we come in at 2,400 and change, and around us it's about 3,000. So even with all these additions, we're still one of the smaller homes in the neighborhood, certainly compatible in terms of size and mass, bulk, and scale. So the actions we're requesting today, Tony went over them. We want to get an amendment to the size limitation on the conditional use permit for the planned residence development to allow for this little bit of additional size that we need that goes above it. And we're asking for this setback modification to that perimeter setback that gets triggered by the new height from the 2nd story that we're adding. And I'll just go through those really briefly. So this is the approval resolution from 1991 for the planned residence development. And this is the condition that established these size limitations, and we're lot number 4. And these sizes, they sort of matched the existing home sizes and maybe went a little bit above them. I don't think they did a visual analysis in 1991 and said 1,800 is sacred and above that is going to be a visual impact. They sort of gave people a little bit of room to remodel it. But I think the main intent of this was if people are going to be doing things up here, it's critical, and they wanted it to come back to your commission to get looked at, rather than it just getting a quick staff approval or even just going to a design board because of the nature of this project. And so that's why we're here today for this. So we're talking about this amendment because we've got a limit of 1,800 square feet, and we have a 1,202 square foot residence, and within our limit, we have 598 square feet available up to that limit. The addition that we are doing is 779 square feet, and that's just the bare minimum we can do to be able to meet minimum sizes on stairs and have walls stack and things like that. And so that ends up generating 181 square feet over the 1,800. So just barely exceeds it. So that would come in within the 2,000 square feet that we're asking for. And then Tony brought up the fact that the city has approved almost identical change to the house right across the driveway from us over on Lot 5. That's this house right here. And that was in 1998. That's their approval resolution. And when they did this in 1998, they actually gave them 2,400 square feet. 2,000 was referenced in the staff presentation. I think they may have only built to 2,000, but the city actually gave them an amendment to 2,400. So the city approved 3 times the amount that we're talking about today for our amendment. We only need 2,000, so 200 square feet over the 1,800. And again, Lot 5 had an 1,800 original limitation. The interesting thing on Lot 5 is to accomplish that project, they also needed a lot line adjustment. That their addition did not fit within the original building envelope on that map, and so that needed to be changed. And again, in our case, we've managed to fit everything within that existing line, and we don't need to change the map. On the setback modification, what's driving that is a couple of things. Number one, obviously, it's triggered by the height. So we're in this zone where height equals setback. So every time you go up, now your setback increases, and they've crossed each other. So we've got this drainage and a drainage easement that comes through our lot, and we can't go inside of that easement. So that sort of sets a limit for us. And our house is pushed up against that. It touches it almost. And a critical point in our house is this stairwell. It has to be where it is, and it can't move in either direction because if it moves further to the left, then it won't make clearance over existing bathrooms in the house. The ceiling will be too low. And if it moves further down, then rooms up above will not meet usable dimensions in the rooms, and it may even actually be a code issue up above. And it can't get narrower because it has to have a minimum of 36 inches on each of the stairwell widths, and furniture has to be able to get around that landing. So it's sort of a fixed point and a fixed dimension where it is and because of where this drainage is. And then above that, we have our garage, which has to be 20 feet deep to meet the transportation requirements. And so that is what is forcing our garage to encroach within the new setback, which has now grown as a function of our second story to be 24 feet. And the 24 feet is really we've minimized the height of this house by minimizing the pitch of the roof and the plate heights. And we've really gotten it down as much as we can, but that is dictating this 24-foot standard setback. And to get all these dimensions to work functionally, they do encroach within that a couple of feet. So the question is, is that a major issue, or is it appropriate? Is it an appropriate improvement on the lot? And here's the house. Again, because of the specific characteristics of this lot, I think that this encroachment is probably okay here. That's the footprint of the house highlighted. And then if I superimpose the new plan on here, I'll highlight its footprint so you can see the difference. Where that encroachment occurs is at the bottom of a slope where you can't really see the difference in the house anyway. It's behind vegetation, which is going to be retained as a condition from Single Family Design Board. And if you look at this from APS, assuming you could look at it at 90 degrees out of your car as you were driving by on APS, which I hope nobody is doing, that's the view of that exact location where that setback encroachment would occur. And because of the vegetation that's already in place, I don't think that anybody can really see the difference between something that's going to be 20 feet or 24 feet or, 26 feet. I mean, it's all behind a tree that's already much closer and bushes that are much closer and at the bottom of a slope. So there are other situations where a setback might be a lot more critical than it is in this case. So the modification here, we believe it is necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on this lot. The addition is appropriate. It's consistent with other additions that have occurred right in this PRD and certainly throughout the surrounding neighborhood. And it's a very small house, and improving it in this way, and in a way that minimizes grading and site alteration, we feel that's appropriate. We believe it does prevent an unreasonable hardship. This is a unique zoning. It's different than the zoning in the surrounding area. It imposes a very different setback that's triggered by height, and the height is already kept to a minimum, but it's triggering this strange setback that doesn't apply to the other E1 properties around it, and to impose it with rigid, not changing it at all would really create a hardship for this owner. And because it forced them to have to do some sort of architecture that's just not compatible with the homes in the area, like flat roofs. And it's going to promote uniformity of improvement. The house is aesthetically compatible with everything around it. It's towards the smaller end of the size with everything around it. The single-family design board looked at that and made those findings, and certainly your board needs to look at it independently. But objectively, we feel that it's the proposed addition and the expanded house remains uniform and compatible with the development and the pattern of development in the surrounding neighborhood. So we hope that you would follow staff's recommendations and approve our requests. And that concludes my presentation. I can answer any questions you have. We also have our landscape architect here, Robert Adams, and our civil engineer, Mike Goins, if you have any specific questions for them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gurin. Before we go to questions from the commission, I'd like to ask, does any member of the public have any comments or question on this particular item? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment on this item, and I will come back to Planning Commission. Any Planning Commissioners have questions for either staff or the applicant? Okay, it was a tie. Let's see. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you. I have a question for the staff. In your draft proposed findings under number 2, you saying the finding that it will not materially affect property values. I'm assuming, but I want your clarification that you're assuming that it would be negative effect to property values. Is that correct, Tony? On page 5, draft findings.
Chair Campanella, Commissioner Thompson, that's right. We say materially detrimental or affect negatively, you could say, the property values.
Okay, so where it says it won't affect property values, you're talking about in a negative manner. You're not.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Peugeot.
Thanks. Just a couple clarification things. I think the first page of the plans is very, very small print, of course, on my copy, but I think it says something like 70 cubic yards of grading. Is that, when you say there's not very much grading, the applicant mentioned not very much grading, is that the range that you were talking about, is something under 100 cubic yards or something like that? Because there is that reference on the cover sheet to 70
Mike
cubic
Goins,
yards.
civil engineer. Yes, that's what we consider to be minimal.
Okay.
Okay, your
All right.
name, please? I'm sorry.
Mike Goins, civil engineer.
Okay,
Okay. And then
thank you.
either staff or to the applicant, there's reference in the applicant's letter to the Homeowners Association approval in 2014, but I don't think there was anything attached to our packets. Could one of you describe what that action was for the record?
Yeah, Chair Campanella, Commissioner Peugeot. The whole PRD here is subject to CC&Rs, and in addition to any action that your commission takes today, the CC&Rs have to be amended as well to accommodate this change in square footage. So before we ever even came here to the city, this owner approached the entire homeowners association with different designs of this project before even coming up with this one, and got approval from the homeowners association. And I think we actually included a homeowners association approval letter with some of our submittal materials. I don't know if you have it here. I didn't put it in my presentation, but there is a homeowners association approval of this design.
You have
in
a
this
letter
project.
or an action to that effect?
Yeah, we do. And this project couldn't proceed without that. I mean, we wouldn't have even come into the city if we didn't have that first.
Okay, while you're there, one more question that perhaps you can ask. When we were on the site visit the other day, you pointed to some areas where the construction parking would most likely be done. Can you just describe those? And then I have a follow-up for staff and the conditions. The language actually says that construction parking and staging will be on site, but I'm not sure what you intended for on-site to mean in this case, because since I believe the building envelope, maybe even the lot itself, is really just the footprint of the house or something.
Yeah, Chair Campanella, Commissioner Peugeot. So within the development, I spent some time walking around up there, and so there's very easily 4 parking spaces on Cerro Vista Lane within the development itself, right across the street. There may be 2 other ones also on Cerro Vista without blocking the one-way traffic flow through there. I don't know how many cars are going to be there during construction. It's not a huge construction job, but the intent is to have the construction workers park within the PRD, certainly not on site, because there's only 1 parking space on the property, or 2 parking spaces on the property itself. So there's no way to have all the construction workers park on lot 4. But the intent is to have them park within the development rather than parking all up and down Newton Road. That was the single concern that was raised at all during any of the previous review of this project by neighbors, and we're well aware of it. So we'll make sure, and we're okay if we're conditioned that way, to notify any of the construction workers that they need to park within the development and not on Newton Road.
Thank you very much. That's all my questions.
Okay, Commissioner Schwartz, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my first question is to staff. On page 3 of the staff report, in the second paragraph, it starts, in 1998, a similar request was approved, and it goes on from there. I'm wondering, Mr. Baumann, why you chose to describe the previous parcel expansion and improvements as similar. And I don't know how important that is for today, and I don't know if Mr. Kalan wants to weigh in there. I just, in referencing it at all and then describing it as similar, I would be interested in understanding how you think it's germane or important to consider for today's item.
Chair Campanella, Commissioner Schwartz, it was similar in the sense that Lot 5, the 1227, also had a maximum square footage limitation of 1,800 square feet, and they requested to go, or were approved to go to 2,000. So in that sense, we're going from 1,800 to 2,000.
Just the square footage is what you're referring to as similar?
Yes, and the existing, both existing houses were very similar in size, and both the completed project at 1227 and the proposed project you're looking at today are very similar in size.
Okay. Then I think going to the findings on page 5, and I asked Mr. Vincent, who's not here with us today, in our last Planning Commission hearing on a different item, this same question pertaining to the language in conditional use permit language. So under findings, the very first item, number 1, the actual language in our conditional use permit code references essential or desirable. The word "or" is what I focused on in our last hearing, because what confuses me then is I think this is staff's language just below it. So the code is italicized, staff's language is below it, and it says essential and desirable. So in that this is an important finding by the Planning Commission, I would just go back to Mr. Kalan and ask, is it or is it and? Because it's a different finding if we have to say both or one or the other. Essential and or desirable.
Chair Campanella, Commissioner Schwartz, I don't know what was intended when that or drafting was done. It might have been that the essential was referring to public welfare and the desirable was referring to public convenience. I can imagine situations where the situation really called for the change to protect health and safety. So I think it's an or, and I think the staff could handle it in their finding under that italicized language by picking essential or desirable and sticking to one of those two.
So I'm just going to comment now, since I'm in the moment, that I would look to staff to change the word and or, because otherwise it would be a different finding for me. Okay, and by the way, this sets up the same type of question just below it in number 2. And number 2 italicized language from our code references, I'll just skip into the middle of the sentence, general welfare, and it will not materially affect property values. But then in staff's language, it says, or affect property values. So I don't want to belabor this, but perhaps between the city attorney's office and staff, you could align the code language with the actual finding language that we need to make. Okay, now I'm going to go to the draft conditions of approval. This is an Exhibit A. I don't know if my first question is for Mr. Kahlon or staff. B1, this is approved development, references, and I'll quote, improvements shown on the plans. So I wanted to know from you, Mr. Kahlon, from a legally binding perspective, how important is it for all of the improvements that we're being asked to approve today under this new set of conditions, the amendment, how important is that be clearly enumerated or identified on the plans as constituting the improvements?
Chair and Commissioner Schwartz, I haven't looked at what improvements are shown, but again, and I don't know the staff practice with what they delineate. Mm-hmm. I think that adding the language and the improvements shown is intended to limit what can be done with the lot later.
Yes.
So it's important to identify everything that the Commission intends to be allowed to be constructed at this time. So it's important that all the improvements be identified.
On the plans. It says here, on the plans.
That's correct.
See, this reference to improvements also appears on the next page, page 2 of, this is now D1, private road improvements. So here again is this reference to improvements, and I don't know, because we're talking about a CUP, I think the diligence is kind of rises to another level than any other set of conditions of approval on a project, which is why, Mr. Kahlon, I'm asking you to maybe advise us and staff to what extent it's important for the improvements to be clearly identified and somehow designated on the actual final plans that will be submitted. It's ironic, too, that just in the Planning Commission's last hearing, we dealt with the same issue of exactly what needs to be contained in the final set of site plans that constitute the totality of the Commission's findings and approval. So that's why I'm zeroing in on that, to ask for your help.
Well, I'd suggest clarifying with the staff whether the plans show the requisite improvements.
Okay, I guess I'll get to that in just a moment. Let me keep going here with a couple of more questions, I think.
Commissioner Schwartz, if we can, we have staff here. Maybe we can
Okay,
complete that
I was just
one
going to continue this, and then we could come
Yeah.
back, but certainly, Ms. Galarte, please.
Well, it's on our
Campanella.
minds. Thanks.
Excuse me?
Chair Campanella, Commissioner Schwartz. So the city's practice is you sign a certain set of plans that go along with the conditions of approval and the description of the project. However, these plans, this project goes forward to the design review boards, so there may be some changes on the plans that may not necessarily be identical to what's on your plan, but that's our role in checking that what the design review boards approve are in substantial conformance with what you saw. And furthermore, once it's submitted to the building plan check, we're checking that it's consistent with both the design review and the planning commission.
Okay, I understand that process.
Thank you.
I think that for now, maybe just, I don't know if this is a question, just as a follow-up to Commissioner Pujo's reference on page 3 of the conditions, and this is the staging. I'm going to ask staff if you're intending now to make some changes. This is E2. Instead of the word or the term on-site, to reference, as Mr. Gorin described it, as actually existing within the PRD boundaries, or whatever word you want to use, because that's where staging is going to occur. There is no available land or square footage on the property to stage the construction activity. So would you be looking to
Yes.
change that language to
Yes, we
reflect
would.
that? Okay. I think those are my preliminary questions. I may come back in a bit once I hear from my other colleagues. Thank you.
Just anyone else? I have a question, just following up on Ms. Gallardi's comments and answers to Commissioner Schwartz. The final approval of this project, the project itself, is going to be done by the Single Family Design Board, the building of the house. I'm not referring to the conditional permit right now, which we do. But is there a level of change that they may make where you would make a determination that it should come back to us because it's a significant change in the plans from what we saw?
If there were a significant change, like exceeding the square footage or changing it significantly, of course, we would bring it back. Otherwise, if it's very minor, it may just be a substantial conformance
Okay,
determination.
thank you for explaining that. Okay. If I see no other questions, are we ready for, sorry,
I just
Commissioner
have one
Schwartz.
more. I'm sorry, I overlooked this. I mentioned the following to Mr. Baumann on Tuesday at our site visit, but I wanted to just get clarification today. The staff report has a set of descriptions that are a little different in the following way than the conditions of approval. And it pertains to the square footage that's excluded from the total proposed square footage, which, as we know, is beyond the currently allowed. So, for example, in the staff report, on page 1 of the staff report, in the first paragraph, the last sentence, total square footage of the proposed residence, exclusive of the garage, is 1,981 square feet. So, garage. Then we go down to Roman numeral 2, required applications, again on the same page. And now in item A, amendment to the conditional use permit, now it says garages and open porches are the excluded square footage. Then we go to page 2 of the staff report, and it's now saying open porches, carports, and garages is the definition of excluded square footage. And then I'll jump to the conditions of approval, and we have open porches, carports, and garages. So I'm just looking to reconcile what is the total description of, first of all, in what recently, I guess, was approved by the neighboring property when the excluded square footage. Is it open porches, carports, and garages that's in the conditions of approval? And does that is that not synonymous? That's probably not the way. Is that identical to the description of the excluded square footage in one of these other lots? I can't remember what you call that. Is lot 5 that recently got the approval to expand? And I don't have that right in front of me to reference whether that also included or referenced open porches, carports, and garages, because I think we want to replicate and to align what exactly we're using in the way of square footage as excluded from the total square footage. I mean, they're coming to us with a request for additional square footage beyond what the PRD allows. So I think it's important for us to have some consistency in the way we're viewing some of the decisions within this PRD, the PRD boundaries.
Chair Campanella, Commissioner Schwartz, I'm sorry for the discrepancies. We didn't in some cases when I worded that, I didn't mention carports because there's none proposed. But I think for the purposes of today, it would be safest to use the language that includes open porches, carports, and garages, because that was how it was worded in the old 1991 conditional use permit that you would be amending. So it'd be safe to just stick to that language for the amendment today.
Okay, you've double-checked that that's how it's phrased in the older, I mean, I have it, in the back of my binder. I could go to it if you tell me the exact page, but, and are we okay that it's only in the conditions of approval and not in the staff report, Mr. Kalan? Is that what's most important? I mean, if we have something that is different in a staff report versus what's in the conditions of approval document with a CUP?
The conditions would control.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That's my additional question. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair Schwartz. I see no other questions. Can we then go to comments? Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you. Well, I think that this is a very worthwhile project, and it certainly is going to improve the quality of life for the owners. And as I mentioned before, I think it does not degrade the property values. It enhances the property values, not only for the owners, but for the neighbors. And for the city, oh, by the way, city and county get more property taxes. So it definitely doesn't degrade the property values. The fact that it adds a garage improves safety and makes it more conforming to the city's zoning codes. And certainly that enhances the neighborhood aesthetics, so we don't have to have the cars parking on the street. This project has been reviewed by the Homeowners Association and the Design Board, and they both liked it. The size that they're requesting is minimal, and the grading that's required is minimal. And I think that the project team should be congratulated for doing an excellent job of fitting a nice improvement to the property on a very constrained lot, both from slope and the easement and the private driveway. They've done an excellent job of that. So there's no negative impacts to the neighborhood of the city, and I don't see any reason why we wouldn't approve it. I would recommend changes to the findings 1 and 2, and that is in the finding for number 1, I would eliminate essential and just say the amendment is desirable for the public convenience, et cetera. And in the finding number 2, I would just simply say the amendment will not be materially detrimental to property values. And I would also recommend that we include in the COA's E2 the construction staging be within the PRD boundaries, as Commissioner Schwartz has suggested. So I'm in favor of approving it and letting them move forward.
Okay, Commissioner Pujol.
Thank you. I see this to be a modest request and a good design. So I have no problem and can support the recommendation. I do like the proposed changes to the conditions regarding the change in condition B2. Is it B2? Is that where you would clarify the open porches? And I don't know if that's the one, but whichever one you suggest that clarifies what's included and excluded in the square footage.
It's correct in the conditions already.
Oh, okay. All right, good. And then the change in the E2 about changing the wording on site into the planned residential development language to clarify where construction parking should be allowed. And I'm ready to support the project when someone makes a motion. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I concur with Commissioner Thompson's comments, and particularly in regards to the parking. There's hardly even one adequate parking space as it is now, and there will be a proper garage with 2 proper parking spaces. So I think this is a good project.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Lodge. Commissioner Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support the project, and I'll make a motion to approve it. Make the findings outlined in the staff report and with the changes to the conditions of approval as outlined by Commissioner Thompson.
Second. Oh,
Commissioner Schwartz has comments before we go to the
I'm
motion.
sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to mention that I, too, will be supporting the applicant's request. I want to mention, because I think it's important to note, that the analysis that Mr. Gorin provided, which was very helpful, of the neighboring properties, yes, this is smaller. Sometimes that's what makes sense for a property. So that it's relatively smaller in and of itself is not the reason for my support, or is not a basis for my support. It really is site-specific and parcel-specific. But having said that, and from our site visit and all the information provided, I think it is appropriate and reasonable, and I understand why it's desirable from the applicant's point of view. And given the suggested changes that have already come forward from my colleagues in the conditions of approval, I am ready to move forward with support.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lodge, you have another comment?
Nothing.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I, too, support the project and can make the findings. I think you've done a very, very good job of trying to conform and comply with the spirit of the conditions of approval that were done back in 1991. And I think you've made an improvement, which considering what period of time has gone by, that it's really good that you can still fit mostly within the same rules, and by doing that, comply with other conditions on stairwells and physically the garage in order to get conformity. So I'm going to support the project as well. I've got one question, if we can, whoever, unless there's any other comments, if somebody's going to make a motion, I'd like to just be clear on findings 1 and 2. There were two proposals for word changes, one by Commissioner Schwartz, the and the or, and one by Commissioner Thompson to remove the second choice, if you will. I'm sorry, to remove, I guess, under number 1, just saying desirable versus essential, and under number 2, will not material be detrimental to property values, I think your wording was.
I think Commissioner Higgins made a motion to include the suggested changes that I had put forth. That motion's already on the table.
No,
Yeah.
what it includes, okay, just to be clear.
Commissioner Chair, just to clarify, the changes to the findings also outlined by Commissioner Thompson.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to clarify that. Okay. And then the condition E2 with construction changes, that language would be incorporated by staff. We have nothing to include relative to the open porches, garages, because that's already included in the conditions. Okay, so we have a motion, and Commissioner, do we have a second with Commissioner Lodge? Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 It's unanimous. Thank you very much. There is a 10-day appeal period on this item, and thank you all for coming, and good luck on the rest of the way of your processing. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, we'll take one.
Okay, the last item on our agenda would be it's the administrative agenda. It's committee and liaison reports, staff hearing officer report. Mr. Jordan is not here today, Commissioner Jordan, so I presume we're not going to have a staff hearing officer report unless somebody has paid attention to it.
No, I didn't.
Okay. Other committee and liaison reports, Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the Historic Landmarks Commission meeting yesterday, February 10th, one of the projects that was before them is 61 Hollister Avenue, which is the direct relief project, which was before us, and it will be coming back before us. And there are some serious concerns because the archaeology report showed a significant area of remains, the middens and so on, in part of the property. And it's an issue because The soil is alluvial soil subject to liquefaction in an earthquake, and the building has to be built on pilings. And there are literally over 15,000 pilings. There are 4 to every 32 square feet. 15,000. If I did the math right. And they are 20 inches in diameter, and they go down 25 feet. Well, going through this, the Commission is concerned about what's going to happen to, when they go down in the area where the archaeological remains are, what the impact will be. So there's going to be more discussion about that before the project will be coming to us. One of the other projects that will be coming back to us is what's now called the Garden Street Market, the market at the corner of Garden and Yananali, and that was before them for their third concept review. So that's another one that will be coming back to us. Thank you.
Okay, any other reports? Commissioner Higgins, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I attended the Downtown Parking Committee meeting this morning, and there was a discussion of their annual budget, and there was also a good discussion about a workshop that they had the following meeting a month ago, and some follow-up action items with regard to the depot lot that has been acquired from the RDA. Primarily, a couple issues there, one of which is the month-to-month nature of the Amtrak lease, and the fact that the Amtrak doesn't contribute any maintenance funds to the city for maintenance of the parking lot. So that is going to be something that city staff is going to try to work some magic with regard to Amtrak and loosen them up for maintenance funds. We wish them luck there. Also, sort of a good discussion about what to do with the depot lot, whether or not there's enough of a demand down there to make some changes to the depot lot, sort of to be determined later to accommodate additional parking demand. But the first thing they want to do is really isolate whether or not there is demand, and they're thinking about hiring a firm to do a parking demand analysis in the neighborhood. So, interesting conversation.
Thank you. Any other reports? I just want to thank Mr. Colon for sitting in today, as Mr. Vincent, I think, is sailing somewhere. And you can tell him that we sail through our agenda as well. Thank you for showing up today. Appreciate it. Okay, no other items? I do not think. So we are adjourned.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would follow on to that. I would note that with Mr. Colon here, we got finished a lot quicker than when Mr. Vincent's here. So maybe we should ask him back for all our meetings.
Yeah, I second that. I think we set a record. I think we're second fastest to a cancellation. So we did a very good job today, and thank you all for that, and staff as well. We were well prepared. So we're adjourned till next meeting, February 18th, 2016. Thank you.